You trust people who smile to your face while plotting your downfall behind closed doors. Every day you extend goodwill to those who drain your energy, sabotage your progress, and poison your peace of mind with their toxic presence. I am Niccolò Machiavelli, the political strategist who spent my life studying the nature of power, loyalty, and human deception in the treacherous courts of Renaissance Italy. What I discovered about identifying and removing destructive people will transform how you protect yourself from those who would use your kindness as a weapon against you. The same principles that helped me navigate the deadly politics of Florence, where one wrong alliance could mean exile or death, can help you reclaim your power in today's world. Whether you're dealing with manipulative colleagues, fair-weather friends, or family members who exploit your generosity, the strategies I'll share will give you the clarity to cut ties without guilt. But first, like this video, subscribe for more Machiavellian wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world needs to learn the art of strategic separation. The letter arrived on a cold morning in March 1513, sealed with the crimson wax of the Borgia family. I can still feel the weight of that parchment in my hands, still smell the bitter scent of conspiracy that clung to every word Cesare had written. At 39 years old, I believed I understood the nature of political alliance. I was wrong. I had spent 14 years serving the Florentine Republic, watching men rise and fall based on their ability to read human nature. The Medici Palace had been my classroom, its marble halls echoing with the whispered promises of courtiers who smiled with their mouths while calculating betrayal behind their eyes. I thought I had learned to distinguish between genuine loyalty and performed friendship. The collapse of everything I held dear taught me otherwise. When the Spanish army approached Florence in 1512, I watched supposedly loyal allies flee like rats from a burning ship. Men who had sworn their devotion to the Republic suddenly discovered urgent business in distant cities. Francesco Vittori, whom I had considered a brother, vanished without a word when the Medici returned to power. The very people I had trusted with state secrets became my greatest liabilities overnight. But it was not the grand betrayals that taught me the most valuable lesson about human nature. It was the small cruelties, the daily erosions of trust that I had ignored for years. I remembered Alessandro, a young clerk who had worked in my office, always eager to help, always volunteering for additional responsibilities. I had praised his dedication, even recommended him for advancement. Only after my fall did I learn he had been copying my correspondence and selling information to rival factions for months. The revelation devastated me more than the loss of my position. I had fed the very serpent that would eventually strike me down. In my desire to mentor promising young minds, I had ignored the signs of parasitic behavior. Alessandro never contributed original ideas, never solved problems independently. He simply absorbed resources, information, and opportunities while giving nothing of value in return. During my imprisonment in the Bargello, chained in that damp cell, I had time to reflect on every relationship that had led to my downfall. The guards would throw scraps of bread through the bars, and I would think about how I had thrown scraps of trust to people who were equally unworthy of nourishment. Each betrayal had followed a pattern I could have recognized if I had possessed the wisdom I am sharing with you now. The Borgia letter that haunted my dreams contained Caesar's coded admission that he had never intended to honor our agreements. The man I had studied, admired, and attempted to ally with had been using our relationship to gather intelligence about Florentine defenses. Every dinner we shared, every philosophical conversation about power and governance had been a harvesting operation. He was gathering what he needed while giving me nothing but false hope and empty promises. That realization birthed my understanding of the 4 types of people who must be eliminated from your life immediately. They are not merely unpleasant or difficult, they are active threats to your well-being, your success, and your peace of mind. I learned to identify them not through dramatic confrontations, but through the slow recognition of patterns that repeated across years of observation. In the depths of my exile, I acquired a peculiar deck of tarot cards from a Venetian merchant who claimed they had belonged to a French fortune-teller at the court of King Louis XII. Whether true or not, 4 cards from that deck revealed to me a universal truth about human nature that transcends any particular era or culture. The first card showed a figure draining blood from a hostile parasite. The second depicted a man embracing his friend while holding a dagger behind his back, the betrayer. The third illustrated a woman whispering poison into multiple ears, simultaneously the poison spreader. The fourth portrayed 2 faces sharing one body, each smiling at different people, the false friend. These 4 archetypes have existed since the first human communities formed around campfires in prehistoric caves. They appear in every culture, every profession, every family, and every friendship circle. They wear the clothing of their time and speak the language of their generation, but their essential nature remains unchanged. What I discovered in Renaissance Italy, you will encounter in your modern world. The reason these patterns persist is simple. They work. Each type has evolved specific strategies for extracting value from others while contributing nothing meaningful. In return, they survive and thrive because good people, people like you, extend trust, offer opportunities, and provide resources without demanding proof of worthiness. Your generosity becomes their feast. But here is what most people fail to understand. These individuals do not simply take advantage of isolated opportunities. They systematically identify targets, establish footholds, and then gradually expand their influence until they can cause maximum damage. The clerk who occasionally uses the office supplies for personal projects is annoying. The parasite who does this is implementing a strategic plan to slowly drain every resource you possess. I spent years believing that human beings were fundamentally decent creatures who occasionally made poor choices under pressure. My experience with the Medici court, the Borgia family, and the collapse of the Florentine Republic taught me otherwise. While most people are indeed decent, these 4 types are fundamentally different. They do not make poor choices, they make calculated choices that serve their interests at your expense. The most dangerous aspect of each type is their ability to mimic genuine relationship qualities. Parasites can appear generous when they are actually investing in future extraction. Betrayers can demonstrate loyalty when it costs them nothing. Poison spreaders can seem like confidential allies when they are gathering ammunition. False friends can provide emotional support when they need to maintain their facade. This mimicry is not accidental. Each type has studied successful relationships and learned to reproduce their surface characteristics without possessing their underlying substance. They are actors playing roles, and they often play those roles convincingly enough to fool intelligent, experienced people for months or years. The tragedy is that by the time most people recognize these patterns, significant damage has already been done. Resources have been drained, trust has been weaponized, reputations have been damaged, and emotional energy has been exhausted. The recognition comes too late to prevent the harm, serving only to explain why you feel so depleted and confused. What I offer you is early recognition, the ability to identify these types before they establish themselves in your life, before they gain access to your resources, before they learn your vulnerabilities, and before they can cause irreversible damage. This knowledge is not theoretical philosophy, it's practical intelligence, gathered through painful experience and careful observation of human behavior across decades of political and personal relationships. The 4 types I will describe are not casual acquaintances who occasionally disappoint you. They are systematic threats to your well-being, who must be eliminated immediately upon recognition. Delay is not mercy, is self-destruction. I keep before me always a leather-bound ledger that once belonged to a Venetian silk merchant named Marco Benedetti. Its pages chronicle the slow financial death of a once prosperous business, each entry documenting how small, seemingly insignificant withdrawals eventually consumed an entire fortune. This ledger taught me to recognize the most insidious of the 4 toxic types, the parasite. Francesco Guicciardini was not an evil man in any dramatic sense. When he first appeared at court, he possessed charm, intelligence, and apparent eagerness to contribute. He volunteered for small tasks, offered assistance during busy periods, and always seemed grateful for any opportunity to help. For months, I considered him a promising addition to our circle, someone who might develop into a valuable ally given proper mentoring and guidance. The pattern began in Francesco would occasionally ask to borrow small amounts of money for personal emergencies. His mother was ill, he explained, or his landlord had demanded immediate payment. The amounts were never significant, few florins here and there, always accompanied by detailed explanations and earnest promises of quick repayment. Being in a position of relative wealth and influence, I considered these loans acts of mentorship, investments in developing loyalty and gratitude. But Francesco's emergencies multiplied with suspicious frequency. His horse went lame, requiring expensive veterinary care. His clothes were stolen from a bathhouse, necessitating replacement before important meetings. His family experienced a series of financial setbacks that demanded his immediate attention and resources. Each crisis seemed legitimate in isolation, but the pattern revealed something darker, more troubling than the money was: Francesco's consumption of time and energy. He would arrive at my office with complex personal problems that required lengthy discussions. His romantic relationships generated endless drama that somehow became my responsibility to help resolve. His professional decisions demanded detailed guidance and repeated explanations. What had initially appeared to be normal mentoring gradually revealed itself as systematic energy harvesting. Francesco possessed an unusual talent for making his problems seem urgent and his need for help appear reasonable. He never demanded assistance directly. Instead, he would describe his difficulties in ways that made offering help seem like my idea. He had studied my personality carefully and learned to trigger my protective and mentoring instincts with surgical precision. The most sophisticated aspect of Francesco's parasitic behavior was his ability to make me feel responsible for his well-being. When I occasionally suggested that he handle certain problems independently, he would express hurt and confusion. Had he done something wrong? Was I disappointed in his performance? His apparent vulnerability and genuine distress made me feel guilty for withdrawing support, so I would inevitably resume providing assistance. This emotional manipulation is the parasite's most dangerous weapon. They create a sense of obligation and responsibility in their hosts that has no basis in reality. Francesco's problems were not my responsibility, but he had gradually transferred ownership of them to me through a series of small requests and emotional manipulations. I found myself invested in his success, not because he had earned my support, but because withdrawing it felt like abandonment. The revelation of Francesco's true nature came through accident rather than insight. During a conversation with another courtier, I learned that Francesco had been simultaneously extracting resources from multiple people using identical stories and techniques. The dying mother, the stolen clothes, the lame horse, all of these crises were being reported to different benefactors as current emergencies requiring immediate assistance. When confronted with this evidence, Francesco did not deny the accusations or express shame. Instead, he attempted to justify his behavior by explaining his difficult circumstances and the inadequacy of his official salary. He genuinely seemed to believe that his needs entitled him to extract resources from anyone capable of providing them. In his mind, my wealth and position created an obligation to support him, regardless of his contribution or behavior. This encounter taught me that parasites do not consider their behavior problematic. They view resource extraction as a natural right, justified by their circumstances and the availability of willing hosts. They do not experience guilt or shame about their systematic taking because they have convinced themselves that they deserve whatever they can obtain. In your modern world, you will encounter parasites who drain your emotional energy through constant crisis and drama. You will meet those who consume your time through endless requests for advice and assistance. You will discover people who gradually appropriate your resources, your opportunities, and even your ideas, while contributing nothing of value in return. The key to recognizing a parasite is understanding that they give nothing meaningful while taking everything available. They may appear generous or helpful, but their apparent contributions always serve their own interests or create obligations that benefit them. They are incapable of genuine reciprocity because they view relationships as harvesting opportunities rather than mutual exchanges. Once you recognize a parasite, elimination must be immediate and complete. They will not reform, improve, or develop reciprocal capabilities. They will continue consuming your resources until you have nothing left to give, and then they will move on to the next available host. Your mercy prolongs your suffering, does not cure their parasitic nature. Among my possessions sits a silver coin bearing the papal seal, payment for services rendered to those who would later orchestrate my destruction. This coin reminds me daily of Ramiro de Lorca and the brutal lesson Cesare Borgia taught me about the nature of betrayal. Not all treachery arrives with dramatic revelation. The most dangerous betrayers are those who cultivate trust specifically to weaponize it against you. Ramiro served as Caesar's governor in the Romagna, a position requiring absolute loyalty and discretion. For months, he executed Caesar's orders with apparent dedication, eliminating enemies and consolidating power with ruthless efficiency. He shared private dinners with Cesare, offered counsel on sensitive matters, and received confidential information about future plans. To external observers, including myself, Ramiro appeared to be Caesar's most trusted lieutenant. What I did not understand at the time was that Cesare had been testing Ramiro's loyalty while simultaneously preparing for his elimination. The Duke had recognized something in Ramiro's character, willingness to betray current loyalties for future advantages that made him useful in the short term, but dangerous as a permanent ally. Cesare was using Ramiro's competence while planning his destruction. The betrayal, when it came, was swift and absolute. Ramiro had been secretly negotiating with Caesar's enemies, offering to deliver the Duke in exchange for political position and financial reward. His apparent loyalty had been a performance designed to maintain access to valuable information and opportunities for sabotage. Every dinner, every confidential conversation, every display of dedication had been part of an elaborate deception. But here is what made this betrayal particularly instructive. Cesare had anticipated it. The Duke had been feeding Ramiro false information, using him to spread disinformation to enemy factions, and gathering intelligence about hostile intentions. Through Ramiro's communications, when Cesare finally had Ramiro murdered and left his body in the public square, it was not an emotional reaction to betrayal. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated strategy. This experience taught me that betrayers reveal themselves through their relationship with loyalty itself. They view allegiance as a commodity to be traded rather than a bond to be honored. Ramiro never considered his service to Cesare as creating genuine obligation. He saw it as temporary employment that could be terminated whenever better opportunities arose. The most dangerous aspect of the betrayer is their ability to perform loyalty convincingly while planning treachery. They study their targets carefully, learning what demonstrations of faithfulness will be most valued and believable. They invest time and energy in building trust, not because they value the relationship, but because trust becomes the weapon they will eventually use to cause maximum damage. In my own circle, I discovered a betrayer named Lorenzo Strozzi, a young noble who had sought my mentorship in political affairs. For over a year, Lorenzo appeared to be a model protege. He sought my advice on important decisions, defended my reputation in social gatherings, and seemed genuinely grateful for the opportunities I provided. When political tensions arose around my position, Lorenzo was among the first to express loyalty and support. The revelation of Lorenzo's true nature came through intercepted correspondence. While publicly supporting me, he had been privately documenting my activities, recording my opinions, and preparing detailed reports for my political enemies. Every conversation we had shared, every confidence I had extended, had been transformed into intelligence that could be used to undermine my position and reputation. What made Lorenzo's betrayal particularly devastating was its calculated nature. He had not been tempted by sudden opportunity or pressured by unexpected circumstances. From the beginning of our relationship, he had been gathering ammunition for my eventual destruction. His apparent loyalty had been a deliberate strategy to gain access to compromising information. Betrayers possess a fundamental character flaw that makes genuine loyalty impossible. They view relationships as temporary, arrangements that exist only as long as they serve their interests. They cannot comprehend the concept of unconditional allegiance because they evaluate every relationship based on its immediate utility. When circumstances change or better opportunities arise, they feel no obligation to honor previous commitments or loyalties. The key to recognizing a potential betrayer lies in observing their relationship with previous loyalties. How do they speak about former employers, past friends, or previous romantic partners? Do they honor confidences from past relationships, or do they share private information to curry favor with new allies? A person who betrays old loyalties will inevitably betray new ones when circumstances make it advantageous. Betrayers also tend to seek access to sensitive information beyond what their position requires. They ask probing questions about confidential matters, volunteer for responsibilities that provide intelligence opportunities, and gradually position themselves as trusted advisors in areas outside their expertise. This behavior stems from their need to accumulate ammunition for future use, rather than genuine interest in contributing to shared objectives. When dealing with a suspected betrayer, the temptation is to confront them directly or to test their loyalty through deliberate challenges. This approach is dangerous because it reveals your suspicions while providing them opportunity to refine their deception. The wiser course is to gradually limit their access to sensitive information while observing their reaction to diminished trust. A genuine ally will respect appropriate boundaries and understand that trust must be earned over time. A betrayer will probe for explanations, attempt to restore previous access levels, and potentially accelerate their treacherous timeline in response to perceived suspicion. Their reaction to reduced trust reveals their true intentions more clearly than any direct confrontation could accomplish. The elimination of a betrayer must be absolute and permanent. Unlike other toxic types who might be managed through limited contact, betrayers pose ongoing security threats as long as they possess any knowledge of your activities or relationships. They will use whatever information they have acquired to cause damage, either immediately or when future circumstances make betrayal advantageous to their interests. On my desk rests an ornate quill pen, its golden nib stained with centuries-old ink, once wielded by the court chroniclers who transformed whispered rumors into written poison. This pen reminds me of Isabella Orsini, the most dangerous woman I ever encountered in the halls of Powernot, because she commanded armies or controlled wealth, but because she weaponized words with lethal precision. Isabella possessed an extraordinary talent for gathering and redistributing information in ways that created maximum chaos, while maintaining her appearance of innocence. She never told lies, technically speaking, but she possessed an artist's skill for presenting truth in ways that destroyed relationships, undermined alliances, and generated conflict between people who should have been allies. I first encountered Isabella at a diplomatic reception hosted by the French ambassador. She approached me with apparent concern about rumors circulating regarding my relationship with certain Venetian merchants. The way she presented this information was masterful. She expressed worry about potential damage to my reputation, while simultaneously ensuring that I became aware of gossip I had not previously known existed. What made Isabella's approach so insidious was her positioning as a helpful ally, warning me about dangers. She never claimed to believe the rumors herself, always expressing doubt about their validity while ensuring that I received every harmful detail. Her apparent loyalty made her poison more palatable and her destructive information more believable. Over the following months, Isabella became a regular source of intelligence about what people were supposedly saying about me, my associates, and my political activities. Each conversation left me feeling more paranoid and isolated, more suspicious of colleagues who might be spreading gossip, and more dependent on Isabella for information about potential threats to my reputation. The pattern became clear only when I began comparing Isabella's reports with actual conversations and behaviors. The dramatic conflicts she described were often exaggerated or entirely fictional. The hostile intentions she attributed to my colleagues were frequently contradicted by their actual conduct. Isabella was not reporting gossip, she was creating it. Her method was sophisticated and calculated. Isabella would have private conversations with multiple people, sharing selective information and asking leading questions designed to generate suspicion and conflict. She would tell person A that person B had expressed concerns about their competence, then inform person B that person A seemed to be undermining their authority. Each conversation was carefully crafted to create misunderstanding and hostility between people who had no legitimate reason for conflict. The genius of Isabella's approach was that she never appeared to be the source of problems. She was always the concerned friend bringing important information, the loyal ally warning about potential threats, the trusted confidant sharing sensitive intelligence. When conflicts erupted between people she had manipulated, Isabella would express surprise and concern while offering to help mediate the disputes she had secretly orchestrated. What drove Isabella's behavior was not simple malice, but a psychological need for drama and control. She thrived on being the center of information networks, the person others turned to for intelligence and guidance. Creating conflict gave her importance and influence she could not achieve through legitimate contributions. She was addicted to the power that came from manipulating other people's relationships and emotions. The most dangerous aspect of Isabella's poison spreading was its gradual, cumulative effect. Individual instances of gossip or manipulation might seem relatively harmless, but over time they created an atmosphere of suspicion and hostility that poisoned entire social and professional environments. People became defensive, secretive, and antagonistic toward each other without understanding why their relationships had deteriorated. I discovered that Isabella used a specific technique I now call rumor laundering. She would gather small pieces of true information, combine them with speculation and exaggeration, then present the mixture as factual intelligence from reliable sources. By the time these stories had circulated through multiple conversations, they had taken on lives of their own, becoming accepted truths that were virtually impossible to correct or disprove. The recognition of Isabella's true nature came when I began systematically tracking the source of various rumors and conflicts in our social circle. Every path of destructive information led back to conversations with Isabella, though she had always presented herself as merely reporting information rather than originating it. She was not just spreading poison, she was manufacturing it, confronting. A poison spreader directly is often futile because they will deny malicious intent and claim to have been trying to help by sharing important information. Isabella, when eventually challenged, expressed hurt and confusion that anyone would question her motives. She had convinced herself that her gossip and manipulation were services to the community, warning people about potential threats and helping them understand social dynamics. The elimination of a poison spreader requires careful strategy because direct confrontation often triggers an escalation of their destructive behavior. They may respond to perceived threats by intensifying their rumor campaigns, or by shifting their focus to destroying the reputation of anyone who challenges them. The safer approach is to gradually limit their access to information while building awareness among others about their manipulative patterns. In your modern world, poison spreaders thrive in social media environments, workplace gossip networks, and family dynamics where information travels quickly and verification is difficult. They may present themselves as concerned friends, helpful colleagues, or caring family members, while systematically destroying relationships and creating unnecessary conflict. The key to recognizing a poison spreader is paying attention to the emotional aftermath of conversations with them. Do you feel more paranoid, suspicious, or angry after speaking with them? Do they frequently bring you information about what others have supposedly said or done? Do conflicts and misunderstandings seem to multiply in their presence? Once identified, a poison spreader must be completely cut off from access to your personal information and private thoughts. They will weaponize anything you share with them, turning your confidences into ammunition for future attacks against you or others in your circle. Their need for drama and control makes rehabilitation impossible. They will continue spreading poison as long as they have access to relationships and information. I possess a theatrical mask from the commedia dell'arte, its painted face split between joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. This mask serves as my daily reminder of Pier Soderini, the man who taught me that the most dangerous betrayers are those who convince you they are incapable of betrayal. The false friend is perhaps the most devastating of the four toxic types, because they destroy not just your resources or reputation, but your faith in friendship itself. Pier appeared in my life during my early years in government service, when I was still naive enough to believe that shared values and mutual respect formed the foundation of lasting alliances. He possessed every quality I valued in a potential friend: intelligence, wit, apparent integrity, and genuine interest in political philosophy. Our conversations ranged from practical governance to abstract theories of power, and Pier seemed to share my commitment to strengthening the Florentine Republic. What made Pier particularly appealing as a friend was his apparent vulnerability. He confided in me about his insecurities, his struggles with certain aspects of political life, and his occasional doubts about his own capabilities. This openness created intimacy between us and made me feel protective of him. I genuinely believed that I was helping a worthy person navigate the complexities of political service. For 3 years, Pier and I maintained what I considered a close friendship. We dined together regularly, shared confidential thoughts about colleagues and political situations, and supported each other through various professional challenges. When I achieved success, Pier celebrated with apparent genuine joy. When I faced difficulties, he offered comfort and practical assistance. To all external observers, including myself, we were true friends bound by mutual loyalty and shared purpose. The illusion shattered during the crisis that led to my political downfall. When the Medici returned to power and my position became precarious, I turned to peer for the support that friends provide during times of crisis. Instead of loyalty, I encountered calculated distance. Peers suddenly became unavailable for our regular meetings, claiming pressing obligations that had never existed before. When we did speak, his warmth had transformed into polite formality, but the revelation of Pierre's true nature went deeper than simple abandonment during crisis. Through conversations with other colleagues, I learned that Pierre had been undermining my reputation for months before my fall from grace. The confidences I had shared with him about my concerns, my strategies, and my assessment of various political figures had been transformed into weapons against me. Pierre had used our friendship as an intelligence-gathering operation. Every personal struggle I had confided, every private opinion I had expressed, every moment of vulnerability I had shared had been carefully catalogued and strategically deployed to damage my credibility and reputation. The man I had considered my closest ally had been working systematically to orchestrate my destruction. What made this betrayal particularly sophisticated was Pierre's emotional manipulation. He had created artificial intimacy through calculated vulnerability, sharing just enough personal information to encourage reciprocal confessions, while never revealing anything that could genuinely compromise his own position. His apparent openness was bait designed to encourage my actual openness. The false friend differs from other toxic types in their long-term strategic thinking. While parasites seek immediate benefit and betrayers respond to emerging opportunities, false friends play extended games that may take years to reach fruition. They invest significant time and energy in building deep relationships specifically to maximize the damage they can eventually cause. Pierre had studied my personality and identified my psychological needs: the desire for intellectual companionship, the need for political alliance, and the longing for genuine friendship in an environment dominated by transactional relationships. He had systematically provided false fulfillment of these needs, while gathering the intelligence and influence necessary to destroy me when circumstances made betrayal advantageous. The most insidious aspect of false friends is their ability to provide genuine emotional satisfaction while pursuing destructive agendas. Pierre's companionship had been real, even if his motives were false. The conversations we shared, the support he provided, and the intellectual stimulation of our relationship had genuinely enriched my life, while simultaneously making me more vulnerable to his eventual attack. False friends are master psychologists who understand that authentic feeling relationships require authentic feeling emotions. They do not simply pretend to care, they actually generate temporary caring feelings that make their performance convincing to themselves as well as their targets. This emotional authenticity makes their betrayal particularly devastating because it feels like the destruction of something that was real and valuable. The key to recognizing a false friend lies in observing the consistency of their loyalty across different circumstances. Genuine friends maintain their care and support regardless of your social status, professional success, or ability to provide benefits. False friends modulate their friendship based on your utility to their agenda. Pay attention to how potential friends respond to your vulnerabilities and struggles. Do they offer genuine support and practical assistance, or do they seem primarily interested in gathering information about your weaknesses? Do they share proportional vulnerability in return, or do they encourage your openness while maintaining emotional distance themselves? False friends also tend to isolate their targets from other relationships. They may subtly discourage your friendships with others, express concerns about the loyalty or trustworthiness of your other allies, or position themselves as your primary emotional support system. This isolation makes you more dependent on their friendship while reducing your access to alternative perspectives that might reveal their true nature. The elimination of a false friend requires emotional strength because you must destroy a relationship that has provided genuine satisfaction and fulfillment. The temptation is to maintain the friendship while simply being more cautious about what you share. This approach is dangerous because false friends are patient and persistent. They will wait for opportunities to exploit whatever trust remains. When you recognize a false friend, you must accept that the entire relationship was contaminated. From its foundation, the moments of genuine connection, the support they provided, and the intellectual or emotional satisfaction you derived were all tools in a larger strategy of manipulation and control. Preserving any aspect of the relationship allows them to continue their long-term campaign against your well-being. The complete elimination of a false friend often triggers their most dangerous behavior, as they may attempt to use whatever information and influence they have accumulated to cause immediate damage. However, allowing them to maintain any foothold in your life guarantees continued manipulation and eventual betrayal when circumstances align with their interests. Before me sits a polished bronze mirror, its surface reflecting not just physical appearance but the deeper truths that careful observation reveals. This mirror belonged to one of my intelligence agents, a man who understood that survival depended on seeing people as they truly were rather than as they presented themselves. The art of recognition is not instinct, is a learnable skill that requires systematic observation and disciplined thinking. During my years in diplomatic service, I developed what I call the 3-test method for evaluating human character. These tests reveal a person's true nature more reliably than months of casual interaction or years of surface-level friendship. They work because they create situations where maintaining false personas becomes difficult or impossible. The first test is the crisis revelation. People's authentic character emerges when they face unexpected pressure, significant loss, or genuine threat. The courteous colleague who becomes vicious when passed over for promotion. The generous friend who disappears when you face financial difficulty. The supportive family member who turns hostile when you succeed beyond their achievements crisis. Strips away social facades and reveals core personality traits. I learned to create small crisis situations deliberately, not to cause harm but to observe reactions. When working with new associates, I would occasionally present them with competing loyalties, minor resource limitations, or temporary setbacks to see how they responded. Did they maintain their stated principles under pressure? Did they honor commitments when fulfillment became inconvenient? Did they support allies when doing so offered no personal benefit? The second test is the benefit analysis. How does a person behave when they believe no one is watching and when their actions offer no immediate reward? The colleague who works diligently only when supervisors are present. The friend who shows interest only when you can provide entertainment or assistance. The family member who maintains contact only when they need something. These patterns reveal whether someone's positive behavior is authentic or performative. I would arrange to observe people when they thought their actions were private or inconsequential. How did they treat servants, clerks, and others who possessed no power to help or harm them? How did they handle responsibilities when completion was expected but not monitored? Did they maintain the same ethical standards in private that they professed in public? The third test is the consistency evaluation. Authentic character traits remain stable across different environments, relationships, and time periods. People who are genuinely trustworthy demonstrate reliability in small matters, as well as large ones. Those who are authentically generous show consistent patterns of sharing resources and opportunities. Individuals with genuine integrity maintain their principles, regardless of changing circumstances, but toxic types reveal themselves through inconsistency. The parasite who appears generous when attracting new hosts, but becomes demanding once relationships are established. The betrayer who demonstrates loyalty to multiple parties while secretly serving none. The poison spreader whose supportive words in direct conversation contradict the rumors they spread in private. The false friend whose warmth fluctuates based on your current usefulness to their agenda. The most important aspect of recognition is understanding that first impressions are often deliberately crafted to deceive. Toxic people study their targets and present exactly the personality traits that will be most appealing and disarming. The person who seems too perfect, too understanding, or too immediately compatible may be performing a character designed specifically to manipulate your psychological vulnerabilities. I learned to be suspicious of people who seemed to share all my interests, agree with all my opinions, and validate all my perspectives without offering any original thoughts or constructive challenges. Genuine relationships involve some friction, disagreement, and mutual growth. Relationships that feel effortless from the beginning often involve one person doing all the authentic relating, while the other performs whatever role seems most advantageous. Pay particular attention to how potential allies handle confidential information. Do they share secrets that others have trusted them with? Do they gossip about mutual acquaintances or reveal private information to curry favor with you? A person who violates confidences from previous relationships will inevitably violate confidences from your relationship when circumstances make betrayal advantageous. The timing of people's interest in your life often reveals their true motivations. Those who seek your friendship immediately after you achieve success, receive recognition, or gain access to valuable resources may be responding to opportunity rather than genuine affection. Conversely, people who maintain consistent interest in your well-being, regardless of your changing circumstances, demonstrate authentic care. One of the most reliable indicators of character is how people respond to your boundaries and limitations. When you say no to requests, decline invitations, or establish rules about what you will and will not do, observe the reaction carefully. Authentic allies respect your boundaries even when disappointed. Toxic types often respond with manipulation, guilt, anger, or attempts to circumvent your stated limitations. The key to developing recognition skills is learning to trust patterns over promises, actions over words, and consistency over charm. Most people want to believe the best about others, and this generous impulse makes them vulnerable to skilled manipulators who understand how to exploit optimism and good faith. Document your observations systematically rather than relying on memory or impression. Keep mental notes about how people behave in different situations, what they say about others when those people are absent, and whether their actions align with their stated values and commitments. Patterns that seem insignificant individually often reveal themselves as meaningful when viewed collectively over time. Remember that recognizing toxic people is not about becoming cynical or suspicious of everyone you meet. Most people are fundamentally decent, though they may occasionally make poor choices or act selfishly under pressure. The 4 toxic types represent a small percentage of the population, but their capacity for damage makes early recognition essential for protecting your well-being and success. The art of recognition requires patience, because toxic people often invest considerable time and energy in building trust before revealing their true nature. Do not expect to identify threats immediately. Instead, maintain appropriate caution while gathering evidence about character through systematic observation and testing. When your instincts suggest something is wrong with a relationship, trust those feelings even if you cannot articulate specific concerns. Your subconscious mind often recognizes patterns and inconsistencies before your rational mind can identify and explain them. The feeling that something is off about a person should trigger increased vigilance rather than being dismissed as paranoia or overthinking. Among my possessions is a golden chain that once symbolized my high office in the Florentine government. What began as a badge of honor gradually became a shackle that bound me to relationships and obligations that served others' interests rather than my own. This chain taught me that even intelligent, experienced people can become psychologically trapped in toxic relationships through mechanisms that have nothing to do with affection or loyalty. The most insidious aspect of toxic relationships is how they exploit our positive qualities against us. My commitment to loyalty made me reluctant to abandon people who had once been allies, even when their behavior no longer warranted my support. My belief in human potential kept me hoping that toxic individuals would eventually recognize their destructive patterns and choose to change. My desire to honor past investments prevented me from acknowledging that some relationships had become irredeemably harmful. I maintained my connection with Francesco long after recognizing his parasitic nature, because I had invested significant time, energy, and resources in attempting to help him develop into a valuable ally. The idea of abandoning this investment felt like admitting failure and wasting everything I had already given. This psychological trap, which modern thinkers call the sunk cost fallacy, keeps people trapped in destructive relationships because the pain of acknowledging wasted investment feels greater than the ongoing cost of continued exploitation. My relationship with Pierre persisted despite warning signs, because I had built my social identity partly around our friendship. Being known as Pierre's close ally provided social status and political credibility that I was reluctant to lose. Ending the relationship would have required explaining the change to mutual acquaintances and potentially damaging my reputation if Pierre chose to spread his version of events. The social cost of separation seemed greater than the personal cost of maintaining a relationship that no longer served my interests. Fear of confrontation also trapped me in toxic relationships. Direct conversations about unacceptable behavior require emotional courage and often generate immediate conflict. It seemed easier to manage toxic people through boundaries and limited contact rather than risking the drama and hostility that complete separation might provoke. This avoidance strategy provided short-term peace while ensuring long-term exploitation and manipulation. Perhaps most powerfully, I clung to toxic relationships because of genuine moments of positive connection that had occurred in the past. The memory of meaningful conversations with Pierre, Francesco's occasional expressions of gratitude, and Isabella's rare demonstrations of authentic concern created emotional anchors that made separation feel like betrayal of something valuable and real. These positive memories became psychological chains that bound me to people whose current behavior was consistently harmful. The hope that people could change provided another powerful psychological trap. I wanted to believe that Francesco could develop genuine reciprocity, that Pierre could choose authentic friendship over strategic manipulation, that Isabella could learn to build rather than destroy relationships. This optimism kept me engaged with toxic people far longer than wisdom would have recommended, always believing that the next conversation might produce the breakthrough that would transform them into healthy allies. My desire to be seen as a good person also contributed to toxic attachment. Abandoning people felt cruel and selfish, regardless of how they had treated me. I wanted others to view me as someone who stood by his friends, honored his commitments, and gave people second chances. This self-image became more important than my actual well-being, trapping me in relationships that were slowly destroying my peace of mind and professional effectiveness. Social pressure from others who did not understand the full situation made separation even more difficult. Mutual friends would encourage me to be patient with Francesco's problems, to give Pierre the benefit of the doubt, to remember Isabella's positive qualities. Well-meaning advice to be forgiving and understanding came from people who had not experienced the systematic manipulation and exploitation that I was enduring. The gradual nature of toxic behavior also makes separation psychologically difficult. People do not usually reveal their worst qualities immediately. They escalate slowly, allowing their targets to adjust to increasing levels of unacceptable treatment. Each boundary violation feels only slightly worse than the last, making it difficult to identify the point where behavior has become truly intolerable. By the time the damage is obvious, psychological adaptation has made extreme treatment feel normal. Understanding these psychological mechanisms is essential for breaking free from toxic attachments. Recognize that your positive qualities, optimism, forgiveness, commitment can be weaponized against you by people who do not share these values. The traits that make you a good person also make you vulnerable to those who view relationships as opportunities for exploitation rather than mutual benefit. Accept that some investments cannot be recovered and that continuing to invest in failed relationships only increases your total loss. The time, energy, and resources you have already given to toxic people are gone regardless of what you do next. Your only choice is whether to limit your losses through immediate separation or to continue accumulating damage through ongoing attachment. Understand that the fear of confrontation often causes more suffering than confrontation itself. While ending toxic relationships may generate temporary drama and hostility, maintaining them guarantees ongoing manipulation and exploitation. The short-term pain of separation is finite, while the long-term cost of toxic attachment is unlimited. Most importantly, recognize that hope for change must be based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. People change when they recognize problems in their behavior and take consistent action to address them. Toxic individuals who blame others for relationship problems, make excuses for harmful behavior, or promise change without demonstrating sustained effort are unlikely to develop healthier relationship patterns. Your psychological attachment to toxic people is not weakness, it is evidence of your capacity for loyalty, hope, and genuine care. But these same qualities must be protected from those who would exploit them for destructive purposes. I keep upon my desk a ceremonial dagger that once belonged to Cardinal Borgia, its blade still sharp despite centuries of age. This weapon serves as my reminder that some acts require decisive finality, that half measures and gradual approaches often cause more suffering than swift, complete action. The elimination of toxic people from your life is not a casual conversation or a gradual cooling of relations. It is a deliberate ceremony that requires preparation, courage, and absolute commitment to finality. The decision to cut someone from your life must be made in solitude, away from their influence and manipulation. Toxic people possess an uncanny ability to sense when their position is threatened, and they will deploy every weapon in their arsenal to maintain access to your resources and emotions. They will offer apologies that sound sincere but lack behavioral change. They will promise reform while continuing destructive patterns. They will manipulate your emotions through guilt, anger, and false vulnerability. Before confronting a toxic person, I recommend conducting what I call the final assessment. Review the entire history of your relationship, documenting patterns of behavior rather than isolated incidents. Has this person consistently demonstrated respect for your boundaries? Have they shown genuine reciprocity in your exchanges? Do they accept responsibility for their harmful actions? Or do they blame others for relationship problems? Have they made sustained efforts to change destructive behaviors after previous conversations? This assessment must be conducted with brutal honesty, setting aside hopes, excuses, and optimistic interpretations. Most people want to believe the best about others, and this generous impulse makes them vulnerable to skilled manipulators who understand how to exploit forgiveness and second chances. The question is not whether this person has positive qualities or has occasionally treated you well. The question is whether the relationship contributes more value than damage to your life. Once you have made the decision to eliminate someone, the timing of action becomes crucial. Do not delay while hoping for natural opportunities or easier circumstances. Toxic people often sense impending separation and may escalate their manipulation or attempt preemptive strikes against your reputation. The longer you wait, the more opportunity they have to cause additional damage or complicate the separation process. Choose a method of confrontation that matches the severity of their behavior and your need for closure. For parasites who have been primarily annoying rather than dangerous, a clear statement of boundaries followed by consistent enforcement may suffice. Explain that you will no longer provide the resources they have been extracting and maintain absolute consistency in refusing future requests, regardless of emergencies or emotional appeals. For betrayers, poison spreaders, and false friends whose behavior poses ongoing threats to your well-being, more decisive action is required. These individuals must be completely eliminated from your life with no possibility of future contact or reconciliation. Their capacity for causing damage makes any continued relationship unacceptably dangerous. When executing the separation, be direct, specific, and final. Explain exactly why the relationship is ending, citing specific behaviors and patterns rather than general feelings or impressions. This clarity serves two purposes. It eliminates ambiguity that toxic people might exploit to maintain contact, and it provides them with accurate information about why their behavior was unacceptable. Should they choose to learn from the experience, do not engage in lengthy negotiations or detailed explanations beyond your initial statement. Toxic people will attempt to debate your decision, justify their behavior, or manipulate you into giving them another chance. The conversation is not a negotiation, it is an announcement. You are informing them of your decision, not seeking their approval or understanding. Expect escalation in response to separation. Toxic people often respond to loss of access by intensifying their efforts to restore control through anger, emotional manipulation, threats, or attempts to damage your reputation. This escalation is actually confirmation that separation was necessary. Healthy people respect boundaries even when disappointed, while toxic individuals respond to boundaries with hostility and manipulation. Prepare for practical complications that may arise from separation. If the toxic person is a colleague, family member, or someone embedded in your social circle, their elimination may require strategic planning to minimize disruption to other relationships. Consider who might be affected by the separation and whether advanced communication is necessary to prevent misunderstandings or manipulation of mutual connections. The moment of cutting requires emotional strength because toxic people excel at triggering guilt, doubt, and sympathy. They may cry, express hurt and confusion, claim that you are being unfair or cruel, or attempt to remind you of positive aspects of your relationship. Remember that these responses are often calculated performances designed to restore their access to your resources and emotions. When I finally confronted Francesco about his parasitic behavior, he responded with tears and apparent remorse, promising to change his ways and expressing gratitude for my patience and support. Everything about his reaction seemed genuine and heartfelt. But within days of our conversation, he was approaching other members of our circle with the same stories and requests he had used to manipulate me. His emotional performance had been exactly that, a performance designed to maintain access to exploitation opportunities. The elimination process is not complete with a single conversation. You must also remove their access to information about your life through mutual friends, social media connections, and professional relationships. Toxic people often attempt to maintain surveillance and influence through indirect channels, gathering intelligence about your activities and using mutual connections to send messages or apply pressure. Inform trusted allies about the separation, so they understand not to share information about your life or serve as intermediaries for future contact attempts. Most people will respect your decision if you explain that the relationship was harmful and that you need their support in maintaining boundaries. The ceremony of cutting is painful but liberating. You will likely experience guilt, sadness, and doubt about your decision, especially if the toxic person was someone you genuinely cared about. These feelings are normal and do not indicate that separation was wrong. They indicate that you are a caring person who takes relationships seriously. But beneath the immediate emotional pain, you will begin to notice a profound sense of relief. The constant vigilance required to manage toxic people disappears. The energy that was being drained by their manipulation and exploitation becomes available for positive purposes. The peace of mind that comes from eliminating ongoing threats to your well-being creates space for growth and genuine happiness. Upon my writing table lies a parchment scroll bearing the papal seal of forgiveness, a document that once absolved me of political sins, both real and imagined. This scroll reminds me that the most difficult aspect of eliminating toxic people is not the act itself, but the guilt that follows the gnawing feeling that perhaps you were too harsh, too quick to judge, or too unwilling to extend mercy to someone who might have changed given more time and patience. When I finally severed my relationship with Francesco, the immediate relief was overwhelming. No more emergency requests for money, no more lengthy conversations about his endless personal crises, no more energy drained by his constant need for attention and resources. But within days, guilt began to consume me more powerfully than his manipulation ever had. I found myself questioning every aspect of my decision. Had I been too demanding in my expectations of reciprocity? Was I being cruel to someone who was simply struggling with difficult circumstances? Had my privileged position made me insensitive to the challenges faced by those with fewer resources and opportunities? Perhaps Francesco's behavior was not parasitic manipulation, but genuine need that I had misinterpreted through the lens of my own cynicism. This guilt was not based on new evidence about Francesco's character or behavior. It was based on my own discomfort with making definitive judgments about another person's worthiness. The act of cutting someone from my life felt like an arrogant claim to moral superiority, as if I were declaring myself perfect while condemning them as irredeemably flawed. But I came to understand that this guilt was itself a form of manipulation, not necessarily from Francesco directly, but from the social conditioning that teaches good people to doubt their own judgment. When it conflicts with ideals of universal forgiveness and endless second chances, society benefits when individuals sacrifice their own well-being to maintain relationships with destructive people, because it reduces conflict and maintains social stability, even at the cost of individual happiness and success. The guilt I experienced was actually evidence of my own moral development and emotional health. People who feel no guilt when ending relationships, even toxic ones, often lack the empathy and conscience that make healthy relationships possible. My discomfort with causing pain to Francesco proved that I was capable of genuine care. But this same capacity for care had been exploited by someone who did not reciprocate it. I learned to distinguish between healthy guilt, which motivates us to correct genuine wrongdoing, and toxic guilt, which manipulates us into accepting unacceptable treatment. Healthy guilt arises when we have actually harmed someone through our actions or negligence. Toxic guilt arises when we protect ourselves from people who are actively harming us, even if our protection causes them disappointment or distress. Francesco's distress at losing access to my resources was real, but it was not my responsibility to alleviate suffering that resulted from his own destructive choices. His financial problems were consequences of his poor decision-making and parasitic lifestyle, not emergencies that created obligations for others to solve. My refusal to continue enabling his dysfunction was actually more compassionate than continued support would have been. The most insidious aspect of toxic guilt is how it reframes self-protection as cruelty and boundary setting as selfishness. When you refuse to allow someone to exploit your generosity, they may respond by claiming that you are being heartless or abandoning them in their time of need. This manipulation is designed to trigger your caring instincts and restore their access to your resources. I realized that continuing to support toxic people is not compassionate, is enablement that prevents them from experiencing the natural consequences of their behavior. By constantly rescuing Francesco from the results of his poor choices, I had actually been preventing him from developing better decision-making skills and more reciprocal relationship patterns. My supposed kindness was perpetuating his dysfunction. True compassion sometimes requires causing short-term pain to prevent long-term harm. A surgeon who refuses to operate because cutting would hurt the patient is not compassionate, he is allowing a treatable condition to become fatal. Similarly, maintaining relationships with toxic people to avoid hurting their feelings allows destructive patterns to continue and escalate. The guilt you feel after eliminating toxic people may also stem from mourning the loss of who you hoped they could become, rather than accepting who they actually are. I grieved not for Francesco as he was, but for the loyal ally I had imagined he might develop into with proper support and guidance. This grief was based on fantasy rather than reality, but it felt genuine because my hopes had been sincere. When guilt arises after cutting toxic relationships, examine its source carefully. Are you feeling bad because you actually did something wrong, or because you did something necessary that conflicts with your idealized self-image? Are you mourning a real loss, or are you mourning the destruction of illusions that were never based in reality? Remember that toxic people often continue attempting to manipulate you through guilt even after separation. They may send messages expressing hurt and confusion about your decision, asking what they did wrong or pleading for another chance. These communications are designed to trigger your empathy and restore their access to exploitation opportunities. Do not mistake their skilled manipulation for genuine remorse or desire to change. The ultimate test of whether your guilt is justified is examining the long-term consequences of your decision. In the months and years following my separation from Francesco, I watched him repeat identical patterns with other potential hosts. He found new people to provide financial support, emotional labor, and problem-solving assistance while contributing nothing meaningful in return. My elimination of him had not destroyed his life, had simply forced him to find new sources of exploitation. Meanwhile, the energy and resources I had been giving to Francesco became available for relationships and activities that actually enriched my life. I developed deeper friendships with people who provided genuine reciprocity. I invested time in projects that generated meaningful results rather than endless drama. The guilt I had felt about ending our relationship was replaced by gratitude that I had finally found the courage to prioritize my own well-being. Your guilt about cutting toxic people is evidence of your capacity for genuine relationship and moral concern. But this same capacity must be protected from those who would exploit it for destructive purposes. The people who deserve your care are those who reciprocate it, not those who manipulate it to serve their own agenda at your expense. In my study stands a marble table carved in perfect circular form, its surface bearing the inscriptions of names that have earned permanent places in my trust and respect. This table represents the concept that has guided my understanding of human relationships since my darkest days of exile, the inner circle, a carefully constructed alliance of individuals whose loyalty has been tested through crisis and proven through time. The elimination of toxic people creates space in your life, but space alone is not sufficient for happiness or success. You must deliberately cultivate relationships with individuals whose character, values, and behavior contribute to your growth and well-being rather than detracting from it. This process requires the same systematic approach and careful observation that you use to identify toxic people, but applied in service of building rather than eliminating connections. After my political downfall, when fair-weather friends disappeared and opportunistic allies revealed their true nature, I discovered who possessed genuine loyalty. Vettori, despite our political differences, continued our correspondence and offered support when association with me carried political risk. Guicciardini, though he disagreed with some of my philosophical positions, maintained intellectual respect and personal friendship regardless of my changed circumstances. These men earned places in my inner circle not through charm or convenience, but through demonstrated reliability during my most vulnerable period. They showed that their regard for me was based on authentic connection rather than transactional benefit. When I could offer them nothing, no political influence, no financial advantage, no social status, they maintained their friendship because they valued our relationship for its own sake. The first quality to seek in potential inner circle members is consistency of character across different situations and time periods. Observe how they treat people who possess no power to help or harm them. Notice whether their principles remain stable when following them becomes inconvenient or costly. Watch for evidence that their positive qualities are authentic traits rather than situational performances designed to achieve specific objectives. Genuine allies demonstrate what I call character independence. They maintain their values and behavior patterns regardless of external pressures or changing circumstances. They are the same person in private as they are in public, with subordinates as with superiors, during success as during failure. This consistency indicates that their positive qualities are intrinsic rather than strategic. The second essential quality is reciprocal investment in the relationship. Healthy connections involve mutual exchange of support, resources, and emotional energy over time. While perfect balance is neither possible nor necessary, genuine allies contribute meaningfully to your well-being while receiving meaningful contributions. In return, they offer assistance during your difficulties and accept help during their own challenges without exploitation or excessive dependency. True reciprocity extends beyond material exchanges to include emotional support, intellectual stimulation, and shared growth. The friends in my inner circle challenged my thinking when disagreement served my development, celebrated my successes without resentment, and provided comfort during failures without judgment. They invested in my flourishing as I invested in theirs. The third crucial quality is respect for boundaries and limitations. Healthy people understand that no individual can meet all needs or solve all problems, and they do not attempt to extract unlimited resources from their allies. They accept no as a complete answer without manipulation or guilt tactics. They honor your time, energy, and priorities even when these create inconvenience for them. Boundary respect also includes discretion with confidential information and private thoughts. Inner circle members earn access to sensitive areas of your life by demonstrating that they will protect rather than exploit your vulnerabilities. They do not gossip about your personal struggles or use intimate knowledge to gain advantage in other relationships. The fourth essential quality is shared fundamental values, though not necessarily identical opinions or preferences. Inner circle members should share your core beliefs about integrity, loyalty, responsibility, and the treatment of others. These shared values create the foundation for trust and mutual respect that survives disagreements about specific issues or decisions. Value alignment does not require complete philosophical agreement. Some of my closest allies have held different political opinions or personal preferences, but we shared commitment to honesty in our dealings, loyalty to worthy causes, and respect for human dignity. These common principles provided stability when surface-level differences created tension. Building an inner circle requires patience because trust must be earned gradually through consistent demonstration of positive qualities. Do not expect immediate intimacy or assume that initial compatibility will endure through challenges. Instead, allow relationships to develop naturally while observing how potential allies handle responsibility. treat others, and respond to various circumstances over time. Quality far exceeds quantity in inner circle membership. A small number of genuinely loyal, trustworthy allies provides more value than a large network of superficial acquaintances or unreliable contacts. I have learned to prefer 5 authentic friends to 50 casual connections, 3 trusted advisors, 230 available consultants. The process of building your inner circle also requires self-development, because healthy people are attracted to other healthy people. Work on developing the same qualities you seek in others: consistency of character, reciprocal generosity, respect for boundaries, and alignment with positive values. The most reliable way to attract genuine allies is to become someone worthy of genuine alliance. Remember that inner circle membership is earned rather than granted, and it can be lost through betrayal or character deterioration. Maintain appropriate standards for continued inclusion, and be willing to remove people who no longer demonstrate the qualities that originally earned your trust. The strength of your inner circle depends on your commitment to maintaining its integrity. The relationships you build with inner circle members will become sources of strength, wisdom, and joy that sustain you through life's inevitable challenges. Unlike toxic relationships that drain your energy and compromise your peace of mind, healthy alliances multiply your capabilities and enhance your well-being. The investment required to build and maintain these connections pays dividends in personal satisfaction, professional success, and emotional resilience that last for decades. When you surround yourself with people whose character you respect and whose company you genuinely enjoy, you create an environment where growth, achievement, and happiness become natural outcomes rather than constant struggles. In the corner of my study burns an oil lamp that accompanied me through my years of exile. From Florence, its steady flame providing light for writing during the darkest period of my life. This lamp reminds me of a profound truth that most people resist accepting. Solitude is not the enemy of happiness, but often its most reliable guardian. Learning to thrive alone is not merely a survival skill, it is the foundation of psychological strength that makes all healthy relationships possible. When the Medici returned to power and I was stripped of my position, stripped of my income, and stripped of the social connections that had defined my identity, I faced a choice that confronts everyone who eliminates toxic people from their lives. I could desperately seek new relationships to fill the void, accepting whatever company was available regardless of quality, or I could embrace solitude as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. The initial period of forced isolation was devastating. I had defined myself largely through my relationships and political connections, measuring my worth by my usefulness to others and my position in social hierarchies. Without these external validations, I felt like a ship without anchor, drifting in an ocean of meaninglessness and self-doubt. But gradually, I began to discover resources within myself that had been dormant while I was focused on managing relationships and meeting others' expectations. I developed deeper intellectual pursuits, reading classical texts with attention and concentration that had been impossible when my time was fragmented by social obligations. I began writing with clarity and originality that emerged only when I was free from the influence and distraction of other voices. Most importantly, I learnt to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful awareness of disconnection from others, often experienced even in crowded rooms filled with acquaintances who do not truly know or appreciate you. Solitude is the peaceful experience of being comfortably alone with yourself, free from the need for external validation or entertainment. The fortress of solitude provides protection from the manipulation and exploitation that characterize toxic relationships. When you are genuinely comfortable being alone, you become immune to the fear-based manipulations that keep people trapped in harmful connections. The threat of abandonment loses its power over someone who has learned to thrive in their own company. During my exile, I realized that much of my previous social activity had been driven by anxiety rather than genuine enjoyment. I attended gatherings because isolation felt dangerous, maintained relationships because loneliness seemed intolerable, and sought approval because self-validation felt impossible. This anxiety-driven social behavior had made me vulnerable to people who offered connection at the cost of exploitation. Solitude teaches you to identify your authentic preferences and desires without the influence of others' opinions and expectations. When you spend significant time alone, you discover what genuinely interests you versus what you think should interest you. You learn which activities provide real satisfaction versus which ones you pursue for social approval or status. This self becomes the foundation for building healthier relationships in the future. When you know yourself deeply and accept yourself completely, you become less desperate for others' approval and more selective about the company you keep. You can evaluate potential relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than fear of being alone. The fortress of solitude also provides space for developing internal resources that make you a more valuable ally to others. When you are not constantly managing toxic relationships or seeking external validation, your energy becomes available for learning, creating, and growing. You develop skills, insights, and capabilities that enhance your contribution to future relationships. I used my solitary years to study history, philosophy, and human nature with intensity that would have been impossible during my busy political career. This study not only provided personal enrichment, but also prepared me to offer more valuable counsel and perspective to the genuine friends who eventually entered my life. My forced isolation had transformed me into a more interesting and capable companion. Solitude teaches emotional self-regulation and resilience that cannot be developed while depending on others for comfort and support. When you learn to manage your own emotional states, process your own experiences, and solve your own problems, you become less needy and more attractive to healthy people while becoming less vulnerable to those who exploit neediness. The ability to be genuinely happy alone also improves your judgment about potential relationships. When you do not need other people for basic emotional stability, you can evaluate them based on what they add to your life, rather than what they prevent you from feeling. This clarity makes it much easier to recognize both positive and negative relationship patterns before they become entrenched. Building a fortress of solitude requires deliberately cultivating activities and practices that provide satisfaction without depending on other people. Develop intellectual pursuits that challenge and engage your mind. Create artistic or practical projects that provide a sense of accomplishment and progress. Establish routines that give structure and meaning to your days, regardless of social activities. Learn to enjoy your own company by treating yourself with the same consideration you would show a valued friend. Prepare meals you enjoy, create a living environment that pleases you, and engage in activities that bring genuine satisfaction. Rather than mere distraction from loneliness, the fortress of solitude is not about becoming antisocial or rejecting all human connection. It is about developing the internal strength and self-sufficiency that makes you immune to manipulation while making you more attractive to people worthy of your time and energy. When you are genuinely comfortable being alone, you can choose relationships based on their positive qualities rather than accepting them out of desperation or fear. People who have learned to thrive in solitude bring stability, independence, and depth to their relationships that makes them valuable allies and trustworthy friends. They do not drain others' energy through constant need for reassurance or entertainment. They contribute more than they consume because they have developed internal resources that supplement rather than replace external connections. The lamp that lights my study burns steadily whether others are present or absent, just as the strength you develop in solitude provides reliable illumination regardless of your relationship status. This inner light attracts authentic people while repelling those who prefer to operate in the darkness of manipulation and exploitation. Above my fireplace hangs a coat of arms bearing protective symbols, crossed swords, a fortress tower, and a vigilant eagle that once belonged to a military commander who understood that the strongest defense comes from preventing enemy infiltration rather than expelling invaders after they have established footholds. This heraldic shield reminds me that eliminating toxic people from your life is only half the battle. The other half is developing systems and standards that prevent future infiltration by those who would exploit your renewed openness to human connection. After cleansing my circle of parasites, betrayers, poison spreaders, and false friends, I faced the challenge of remaining open to genuine relationships while protecting myself from new toxic individuals who would inevitably attempt to fill the vacant spaces. This balance requires sophisticated judgment. Too much suspicion prevents healthy connections, while too little caution invites repeated exploitation. I developed what I call the graduated access protocol, a systematic approach to allowing new people into my life that provides multiple opportunities to observe their character before they gain access to sensitive information or significant influence over my well-being. This protocol recognizes that toxic people often present themselves most attractively during initial encounters, saving their destructive behavior for after trust has been established. The first level of access involves casual interaction with minimal personal investment. New acquaintances are welcome to participate in group activities, public conversations, and low-stakes collaborations, but they receive no confidential information, financial assistance, or emotional support during this observation period. This level allows you to assess their basic social behavior, treatment of others, and adherence to stated values without risk. During first-level interactions, pay particular attention to how potential allies treat people who possess no power to help or harm them. Do they show courtesy to servants, patience with clerks, and respect for those in subordinate positions? Their behavior toward the powerless reveals their authentic character more clearly than their behavior toward you, because they have no incentive to perform positive qualities for people who cannot advance their agenda. The second level of access involves limited personal sharing and minor favors that test reciprocity and boundary respect. You might share non-sensitive personal information to see if it remains confidential, offer small assistance to observe whether gratitude is genuine, or make minor requests to assess their willingness to reciprocate. This level reveals whether someone respects confidences, appreciates help without developing dependency, and maintains appropriate give and take in relationships. The third level grants moderate trust and more significant interaction, including participation in important projects, access to some personal vulnerabilities, and involvement in decision-making processes that affect your well-being. This level should be reached only after consistent demonstration of positive qualities at previous levels, and never during crisis periods when emotional judgment may be compromised. The highest level of access is reserved for proven allies who have demonstrated unwavering loyalty, consistent character, and genuine reciprocity over extended periods that include various challenges and circumstances. These individuals earn admission to your inner circle through sustained excellence rather than initial promise or temporary good behavior. This graduated approach prevents toxic people from gaining significant access to your life before revealing their true nature. Most toxic individuals cannot maintain positive facades through multiple levels of testing over extended time periods. Their need for immediate gratification, their discomfort with boundaries, and their inability to provide genuine reciprocity expose them before they can cause serious damage. I also established what I call automatic disqualification criteria, behaviors that immediately eliminate someone from consideration for deeper relationship regardless of their other qualities. These include violating confidences shared by others, showing disrespect for clearly stated boundaries, displaying inconsistent character across different situations, demonstrating inability to accept responsibility for their actions, and exhibiting patterns of exploitation in previous relationships. One of the most important protective measures is learning to trust your intuitive responses to new people. When something feels off about someone's behavior or demeanor, pay attention to that feeling, even if you cannot immediately identify specific concerning behaviors. Your subconscious mind often recognizes patterns and inconsistencies before your rational mind can articulate them, however. Distinguish between intuitive warnings and emotional prejudices based on irrelevant factors like appearance, social status, or similarity to people from your past. Genuine intuitive warnings usually relate to character indicators like insincerity, boundary violations, or manipulative communication patterns, rather than superficial characteristics. The most sophisticated toxic people will attempt to circumvent your defenses by appearing to respect boundaries while gradually testing and expanding them. They may initially accept no gracefully while slowly increasing the frequency and intensity of their requests. They may demonstrate reciprocity in small matters while planning larger exploitation. They may show respect for others' confidences while gathering your private information for future use. To counter these strategies, maintain consistent standards regardless of someone's apparent improvement or special circumstances. Do not make exceptions to your protective protocols based on sympathy, social pressure, or promises of future change. Toxic people excel at identifying and exploiting inconsistencies in your boundaries and standards. Building a reputation for having high standards and strong boundaries actually attracts healthier people while deterring toxic ones. When others understand that you do not tolerate exploitation, manipulation, or disrespect, those seeking to engage in such behaviors will often avoid approaching you entirely. Meanwhile, people with genuine character will respect your standards and feel safer in relationships with someone who maintains clear expectations. Regularly reassess your protective systems to ensure they remain effective without becoming unnecessarily restrictive. As you grow in wisdom and confidence, you may be able to recognize toxic patterns more quickly, allowing for slightly faster progression through access levels for clearly healthy individuals. However, maintain core protections consistently. The cost of occasional inconvenience to genuine people is far less than the cost of allowing toxic individuals to infiltrate your life. Remember that preventing future infiltration is an ongoing process rather than a one-time implementation. Toxic people continuously evolve their strategies and may approach you with new techniques based on information they have gathered about your vulnerabilities and preferences. Maintaining effective defenses requires periodic review and adjustment of your protective protocols. The goal is not to become suspicious or closed to human connection, but to develop discernment that allows you to identify and embrace healthy relationships while recognizing and rejecting toxic ones before they can establish footholds in your life. This balance enables you to remain open to the joy and growth that genuine connections provide while protecting yourself from those who would exploit your openness for destructive purposes. Upon my desk sits a smooth stone retrieved from the banks of the Arno River, worn to perfection by centuries of water flow. When cast into still water, this simple stone creates expanding circles that reach far beyond the point of impact, each ring growing larger and more powerful as it spreads outward. This stone reminds me of a profound truth about human relationships. The elimination of toxic people from your life creates ripple effects that transform not just your immediate circumstances, but every aspect of your existence in ways you cannot initially imagine. When I finally severed my connections with Francesco, Pia Isabella, and the other parasites and manipulators who had been draining my energy and resources, the immediate relief was substantial but localized. I no longer faced constant requests for money, time, and emotional labor. The daily stress of managing their crises and demands disappeared. My calendar became my own again, filled with activities I chose rather than obligations they imposed. But within weeks, I began to notice changes that extended far beyond the simple absence of these toxic individuals. The energy that had been consumed by their manipulation and exploitation became available for productive and fulfilling purposes. I found myself approaching projects with enthusiasm that had been missing for months. My thinking became clearer, my decision-making more decisive, and my overall mood more consistently positive. The improvement in my mental and emotional state began affecting my relationships with the healthy people who remained in my life. Wife noticed that I had become more present and attentive during our conversations, no longer distracted by the mental residue of manipulative interactions. My genuine friends remarked that I seemed more like my authentic self again, freed from the defensive postures and emotional guardedness that toxic relationships had imposed. Perhaps most surprisingly, the elimination of toxic people improved my professional performance in ways that created cascading benefits throughout my career. The mental energy that had been devoted to managing parasites and betrayers became available for strategic thinking and creative problem-solving. The emotional stability that emerged from ending manipulative relationships enhanced my judgment and communication skills in all professional interactions. This professional improvement attracted new opportunities and deeper respect from colleagues who had not fully understood why my performance had been diminished. The reputation damage caused by my association with toxic individuals began to reverse as people observed my renewed competence and reliability. Doors that had been closed during my period of toxic entanglement began to reopen. The ripple effects extended to my physical health as well. The chronic stress of managing manipulative relationships had been affecting my sleep, appetite, and energy levels in ways I had not fully recognized while experiencing them. Within months of eliminating toxic people, I was sleeping more deeply, eating with greater pleasure, and experiencing physical vitality that I had not felt in years. These health improvements created their own positive ripples. Better rest enhanced my cognitive abilities and emotional regulation, improved appetite, and energy made social activities more enjoyable and work responsibilities more manageable. The positive feedback loop between mental, emotional, and physical well-being accelerated my overall recovery and growth. One of the most significant ripple effects was the improvement in my judgment and decision-making abilities. When you are not constantly managing toxic people's manipulation and exploitation, your mental resources become available for clear thinking about all areas of life. I found myself making better financial decisions, choosing more rewarding activities, and pursuing goals with focus and determination that had been impossible while my attention was fragmented by toxic relationships. The enhanced judgment also improved my ability to recognize and attract healthy relationships. When you are not depleted by toxic people, you present yourself more authentically and positively to others. The confidence and peace of mind that come from protecting your boundaries make you more attractive to people with genuine character, while making you less appealing to those seeking targets for exploitation. Began attracting allies and friends who were themselves mentally and emotionally healthy, creating an upward spiral of positive relationship experiences. These new connections introduced me to opportunities, ideas, and perspectives that further enhanced my personal and professional development. The quality of my social circle improved dramatically once I eliminated the toxic elements that had been driving away healthy people. The ripple effects also included unexpected financial benefits. The money I had been giving to parasites became available for investments and experiences that actually enhanced my life. The improved professional performance led to better opportunities and increased income. The enhanced judgment resulted in wiser financial decisions and more profitable ventures. Beyond material improvements, the elimination of toxic people created space for spiritual and intellectual growth that had been stifled by constant crisis management. I began reading more deeply, thinking more clearly, and developing philosophical insights that enriched my understanding of life and human nature. The peace of mind that comes from a clean social circle provides the mental space necessary for wisdom and self-development. These improvements in my own life created positive effects for everyone in my remaining circle. My enhanced emotional availability made me a better friend, mentor, and colleague to those who deserved such treatment. My increased energy and resources enabled me to contribute more meaningfully to worthy causes and relationships. The wisdom I gained from eliminating toxicity helped me guide others facing similar challenges. The transformation was so comprehensive that within a year of my systematic elimination of toxic people, I felt like I was living an entirely different life, not because external circumstances had changed dramatically, but because the removal of chronic drains on my energy and well-being had allowed my natural capabilities and positive qualities to flourish without constant interference. This experience taught me that tolerating toxic people in your life affects everything else in ways that extend far beyond the obvious direct impacts. Like a computer virus that slows all functions rather than destroying specific files, toxic relationships diminish your overall performance and satisfaction in every area of life. The ripple effects of elimination prove that the courage required to cut toxic ties is not just an investment in avoiding future harm. It is an investment in unlocking your full potential for happiness, success, and meaningful contribution to the world around you. Standing guard at my villa entrance are iron gates forged by Milanese craftsmen, their black metal bearing scars from attempts at forced entry during the turbulent years following my exile. These gates remind me of an inevitable truth about toxic people. They always attempt to return. The elimination process is never truly complete with a single cutting ceremony, because parasites, betrayers, poison spreaders, and false friends possess an almost supernatural ability to sense when their former targets have recovered strength and resources that might once again be exploited. 6 months after severing my relationship with Francesco, I received a letter that was masterfully crafted to reopen the door I had sealed shut. He began by acknowledging his past mistakes with apparent humility and genuine remorse. He had been struggling with personal difficulties that had affected his judgment. He explained, but recent experiences had taught him valuable lessons about friendship and reciprocity. He expressed gratitude for my previous support and promised that any future relationship would be based on mutual respect and balanced exchange. The letter was accompanied by a small gifter book of poetry that referenced conversations we had shared during the better days of our acquaintance. This gesture was designed to trigger positive memories and suggest that Francesco was appealing to the intellectual connection we had once enjoyed rather than simply seeking material benefits. He requested nothing specific, claiming only to miss our friendship and hope that time had healed any wounds his behavior might have caused. Everything about Francesco's approach was calculated to exploit the psychological mechanisms that keep good people trapped in toxic relationships. The acknowledgement of past problems suggested self-awareness and potential for change. The expression of gratitude implied that he valued what I had given him rather than simply taking it for granted. The promise of improved behavior offered hope that the relationship could become what I had originally wanted it to be. Most powerfully, Francesco's letter triggered guilt about my decision to cut him off completely. Had I been too harsh in my judgment? Was I depriving someone of the chance to demonstrate growth and reformed character? The reasonable tone of his communication made my previous concerns seem exaggerated or unfair, and his apparent vulnerability made refusing his overture feel cruel and unforgiving. This emotional manipulation is the returning toxic person's most sophisticated weapon. They understand that good people want to believe in redemption and second chances. They know that time softens memories of their worst behavior, while highlighting the positive moments that did occur. They recognize that success and happiness make their former targets feel generous and open to reconciliation. But I had learned to evaluate such overtures based on evidence rather than emotion. Francesco's letter contained no specific acknowledgement of his parasitic behavior patterns, no detailed plan for addressing the character flaws that had made him toxic, and no recognition of the damage his manipulation had caused to my well-being and other relationships. His apology was vague and generic, designed to minimize his offenses rather than demonstrate genuine understanding of their impact. More tellingly, Francesco's timing revealed his true motivations. His letter arrived shortly after I had received a significant appointment that restored my political influence and financial resources. This was not coincidental. Toxic people monitor their former targets through mutual acquaintances and social networks, waiting for opportunities to attempt re-entry when exploitation might once again be profitable. When I did not respond to France's initial overture, his subsequent communications revealed the manipulative agenda behind his apparent humility. The second letter expressed hurt and confusion about my continued distance, questioning whether I had truly forgiven his past mistakes. The third message contained subtle threats about our mutual friends and professional connections, implying that my refusal to reconcile was creating social difficulties that could affect my restored position. This escalation pattern is typical of toxic people who were denied re-entry to relationships they had previously exploited. When emotional manipulation fails to restore access, they often resort to pressure tactics, guilt campaigns, or attempts to damage their former target's reputation and relationships. Their response to continued exclusion reveals the insincerity of their initial apology and the persistence of their exploitative agenda. I also encountered attempted returns from peer, who approached me through intermediaries when direct communication proved unsuccessful. Mutual friends would mention how much peer missed our friendship and how sorry he was that political circumstances had affected our relationship. These intermediaries, meaning well, would suggest that enough time had passed to heal old wounds, and that peer had learned valuable lessons from his experiences. This indirect approach is particularly insidious because it uses the good intentions of genuine friends to pressure you into reconciliation with toxic individuals. The intermediaries are not aware of the full scope of manipulation and betrayal that occurred, so they cannot understand why you maintain such firm boundaries against someone who appears to be genuinely repentant. The key to handling return attempts is maintaining absolute clarity about why the relationship was ended and refusing to renegotiate those fundamental issues. Toxic people will attempt to reframe their past behavior as misunderstandings, mistakes under pressure, or normal relationship difficulties that should be forgiven and forgotten. They will minimize the damage they caused while maximizing the positive aspects of your previous connection. Do not engage in detailed discussions about their return attempts, as this provides them with opportunities to deploy emotional manipulation and guilt tactics. A simple, clear statement that the relationship ended due to incompatible values and behavior patterns, and that this incompatibility has not changed, is sufficient. Do not provide specific examples or detailed explanations that they can argue against or explain away. Be particularly suspicious of return attempts that occur during your periods of success, happiness, or increased resources. Toxic people are drawn to strength and prosperity like moths to flame, not because they want to celebrate your achievements, but because they want to exploit them. Their timing reveals that their interest is transactional rather than genuine. Remember that allowing even limited re-entry often leads to complete re-exploitation over time. Toxic people interpret any softening of boundaries as permission to gradually restore their previous level of access and manipulation. The small favor, the brief conversation, or the limited social interaction becomes a foothold that expands until the full toxic pattern is re-established. The pain of refusing reconciliation. Attempts may be intense, especially when the toxic person has learned to mimic genuine remorse and personal growth. But this pain is temporary and finite, while the cost of allowing toxic people back into your life is ongoing and unlimited. The strength to maintain your gates against attempted infiltration protects everything you have built in their absence. Bound in worn leather upon my bookshelf rests a manuscript I created to preserve the lessons learned through painful experience. Knowing that wisdom shared can spare others the suffering I endured. This teaching scroll represents both the responsibility and the challenge that comes with understanding toxic relationships. How to help others recognize and eliminate destructive people from their lives, while respecting their autonomy and accepting the limitations of external influence on personal choices. When my nephew Giovanni began describing his relationship with a charming young merchant named Carlo, every detail he shared triggered recognition of patterns I had learned to identify through bitter experience. Carlo was always experiencing financial emergencies that required Giovanni's assistance. Carlo's elaborate expressions of gratitude for help received were always accompanied by hints about new problems requiring additional support. Carlo positioned himself as Giovanni's closest friend while gradually isolating him from other relationships. Through subtle criticism and manufactured drama, my initial impulse was to warn Giovanni directly about Carlo's parasitic nature, presenting evidence of manipulation and explaining the patterns I recognized. This approach failed completely. Giovanni interpreted my concerns as jealousy over his new friendship, criticism of his judgment, or unwillingness to accept his happiness and independence. The stronger my warnings became, the more defensive Giovanni grew about Carlo, and the more distant he became from me. This experience taught me that people cannot be forced to recognize toxic relationships through external pressure or logical argument. The psychological mechanisms that keep intelligent individuals trapped in destructive connections are often stronger than rational analysis. Direct confrontation with someone's toxic relationships frequently triggers defensive responses that actually strengthen the bond between victim and exploiter. I learned to adopt what I call the Socratic teaching method for helping others recognize toxic patterns, instead of providing answers and judgments about their relationships. I began asking carefully crafted questions that encouraged independent analysis and self-discovery. This approach respects the other person's autonomy while guiding them toward insights they can accept because they reached them independently. When Giovanni would describe Carlo's latest crisis and request for assistance, I would ask questions like, how often does Carlo experience emergencies that require your help? Or has Carlo ever provided significant assistance to you during your difficulties? Or how does Carlo respond when you're unable to help him with his problems? These questions encouraged Giovanni to examine patterns he had not previously considered without making him feel attacked or judged. The Socratic method works because it bypasses the defensive mechanisms that protect toxic relationships. When people discover problems through their own analysis rather than external criticism, they cannot dismiss the insights as outside interference or misunderstanding. The realizations feel authentic and personally meaningful rather than imposed and threatening. However, teaching others about toxic relationships requires extraordinary patience because the process cannot be rushed or forced. People eliminate toxic relationships only when they have developed sufficient internal motivation and emotional strength to endure the difficulty of separation. External pressure, regardless of how well-intentioned, often delays this natural development by creating resistance and defensiveness. I also learned to model healthy boundaries and relationship standards rather than simply explaining them. When Giovanni observed how I handled requests from parasitic individuals, maintained distance from manipulative people, and prioritized relationships with genuinely reciprocal allies, he began to internalize different expectations for his own connections. Demonstration is often more persuasive than explanation because it shows that alternative approaches are possible and beneficial. The most challenging aspect of teaching others about toxic relationships is accepting that some people will choose to remain in destructive connections despite clear evidence of exploitation and manipulation. Giovanni continued his relationship with Carlo for another full year after recognizing the parasitic patterns, because the fear of loneliness and the hope for change outweighed his rational understanding of the situation. During this period, I had to resist the temptation to withdraw my support or punish Giovanni for making choices I considered harmful. This response would have isolated him further and made him more dependent on Carlo's manipulative companionship. Instead, I maintained consistent availability while refusing to enable the toxic relationship through direct or indirect support of Carlo's exploitation. When teaching others about toxic relationships, distinguish between offering emotional support and enabling destructive patterns. You can provide comfort and guidance to someone trapped in a toxic relationship without contributing resources that the toxic person will ultimately consume. You can listen to their struggles without solving problems that should motivate them. To establish better boundaries, the key is maintaining your own boundaries while offering assistance. Do not allow someone else's toxic relationships to drain your energy or compromise your well-being through constant crisis management and emotional rescue operations. Set limits on how much time and energy you will devote to discussing their relationship problems, and refuse to serve as a permanent substitute for the emotional labor they should be receiving from genuine friends. Be prepared for periods when people distance themselves from you because your presence reminds them of truths they are not ready to accept about their relationships. Giovanni avoided me for several months when my questions had helped him recognize Carlos's exploitation, but he still lacked the courage to end the connection. This distancing is often temporary, and maintaining patient availability without pressure often leads to eventual reconciliation when they are ready for support. When people finally do eliminate toxic relationships from their lives, they often experience profound gratitude toward those who supported them through the recognition and separation process. Giovanni eventually cut ties with Carlo and expressed deep appreciation for my patience and guidance during his period of psychological entrapment. These moments of successful teaching create meaningful bonds and provide evidence that sharing wisdom about toxic relationships can genuinely help others improve their lives. The responsibility to teach others about toxic relationships must be balanced with respect for their autonomy and recognition of your limitations as an external influence. You can provide information, ask guiding questions, model healthy boundaries, and offer support, but you cannot make choices for other people or control the timing of their personal growth. The wisdom you share about toxic relationships becomes part of a larger legacy that extends beyond your immediate circle. People who learn to recognize and eliminate destructive connections often become teachers themselves, sharing insights with their own friends and family members. This ripple effect of knowledge and awareness contributes to broader social understanding of manipulation and exploitation, gradually creating communities that are more resistant to toxic individuals and more supportive of healthy relationship patterns. Upon my mantelpiece rests a golden medallion bearing the image of a phoenix rising from flames, its wings spread wide in triumph over destruction. This medallion was crafted by a Venetian goldsmith to commemorate my return from political exile, but it has come to represent something far more profound: the complete transformation that becomes possible when you find the courage to burn away the toxic connections that have been preventing your authentic self from emerging. As I write these final words in the winter of my years, I reflect on the journey that began with painful recognition of the 4 toxic types and led to the profound peace and fulfillment that now characterizes my daily existence. The elimination of parasites, betrayers, poison spreaders, and false friends did not simply remove problems from my life. It created space for the person I was meant to become to finally flourish without constant interference and exploitation. The young man who once tolerated Francesco's endless demands, excused peers, calculated betrayals, ignored Isabella's destructive gossip, and enabled countless others' manipulative behavior, was trapped in a prison of his own making. Every toxic relationship was a chain that bound my authentic self, preventing the development of genuine confidence, clear judgment, and meaningful achievement. I had mistaken tolerance for kindness, enabling for loyalty, and acceptance of unacceptable treatment for virtue. The transformation that followed my systematic elimination of toxic people was more dramatic than I could have imagined when I first began recognizing these destructive patterns. Within months of cleansing my circle, I was thinking more clearly, sleeping more peacefully, and approaching each day with energy and optimism that had been missing for years. The mental space previously occupied by managing crises and manipulation became available for creative projects, meaningful relationships, and personal growth. But the deeper transformation was spiritual and philosophical. Learning to protect myself from exploitation taught me to value my own well-being, time, and resources with appropriate respect. Recognizing my right to establish and maintain boundaries developed into genuine self-love that was neither selfish nor defensive. Understanding that some people are fundamentally incompatible with my values and goals freed me from the exhausting attempt to fix or convert everyone I encountered. The wisdom gained through painful experience with toxic relationships enhanced every aspect of my remaining years. I became a better friend to those who deserved friendship, a more effective mentor to those seeking guidance, and a more reliable ally to those engaged in worthy causes. The energy that had been drained by parasites became available for contribution to people and projects that actually mattered. Most surprisingly, the elimination of toxic people improved my capacity for genuine compassion and forgiveness. When you are not constantly defending yourself against manipulation and exploitation, you can respond to others' struggles with empathy rather than suspicion. When you are not depleted by those who take without giving, you can be generous with those who appreciate and reciprocate your care. The peace of mind that comes from a clean social circle is difficult to describe to those who have never experienced it. Imagine awakening each day without dread about which crisis might demand your attention, which person might attempt to manipulate your emotions, or which relationship might require exhausting management. Picture approaching social activities with genuine enthusiasm rather than defensive vigilance. Consider the relief of trusting that the people in your life actually care about your well-being, rather than simply exploiting your resources. This transformation creates a positive cycle that continues expanding throughout your remaining years. When you are not managing toxic relationships, you present yourself more authentically and attractively to others. When you are not depleted by parasites and manipulators, you have energy and resources to contribute meaningfully to worthwhile endeavors. When you are not constantly defending against exploitation, you can recognize and embrace genuine opportunities for growth and connection. The legacy of strategic separation extends beyond personal benefits to influence everyone whose life intersects with yours. Your healthy relationships become models for others who may be trapped in toxic patterns. Your emotional availability and genuine support provide resources that help worthy people flourish. Your wisdom about human nature and relationship dynamics becomes guidance that can spare others the suffering you endured while learning these lessons. As I prepare to leave this world, I understand that the most valuable gift I can provide to future generations is not my political theories or philosophical writings, but this practical wisdom about protecting oneself from those who would exploit goodness for destructive purposes. The principles I have shared are not merely personal insights, but universal truths about human nature that will remain relevant as long as people form relationships with one another. The 4 toxic types one have described, the parasite, the betrayer, the poison spreader, and the false friend, will continue appearing in every generation, wearing contemporary clothing and speaking modern language, but maintaining the same fundamental patterns of exploitation and manipulation. The techniques for recognizing and eliminating them must be passed from one generation to the next, protecting the innocent and preserving the possibility of genuine human connection. Your responsibility, having received this knowledge, is to implement it courageously in your own life and share it wisely with others who might benefit from these insights. Do not allow false compassion or misguided loyalty to trap you in relationships that diminish your potential and compromise your well-being. Do not mistake the elimination of toxic people for cruelty. Is an act of self-preservation that protects your capacity to contribute positively to the world. The phoenix rises not despite the flames, but because of them. The destruction of what no longer serves creates space for what has always been waiting to emerge. Your authentic self, your genuine happiness, your meaningful relationships, and your valuable contributions to the world are all waiting on the other side of the courage required to burn away the toxic connections that have been holding you back. The medallion before me bears an inscription in Latin: Is sinedibus, hisohugu, from ashes I rise. This is my final gift to you, the knowledge that you possess the power to rise from whatever ashes your toxic relationships have created, emerging as the person you were always meant to become, surrounded by those worthy of your time, protected by boundaries that honor your worth, and free to live with the peace and purpose that come from strategic separation from those who would destroy rather than build. The choice is yours. The wisdom is now in your hands. Use it well.